Hello, everyone. In this session, I want to talk about SAP CAP Framework testing. Truth be told, I have not done much testing myself, but for this I did some research and it looks fairly straightforward. In the past, I used to think that the cost-benefit ratio was not beneficial for testing, but after I did some research, I feel like unit testing is something that everyone can do. It's fairly easy to set up, and that's one of the beauty of this unit testing. But I'll also be talking about some of the tools that you can use for testing as well. So the SAP CAP framework, it supports a lot of the popular testing frameworks. And from whatever research I did, I feel that if you're going to be doing any SAP Cloud Application Programming Model, then Jest is your best bet for doing any testing. Jest is your popular testing framework, and that is your best bet for using in the Cloud Application Programming Model. So one of the reasons why I like Jest is that because it is very easy to set up. There are some sensible defaults, so you can pretty much go with the defaults for all of the values, and you can right away start testing immediately. And it also has support for mocking and also for code coverage. And we will look at this concept of mocking, and you can also run tests that on code that you just changed as well. So definitely, if you're going to be doing testing with the Cloud Application Programming Model, please have a look at the Jest popular testing framework. Now, Jest itself was created by Facebook, now called Meta, and I think initially it was used to test the React applications, but since React is written in JavaScript, slowly Jest is now used to test the JavaScript, Node.js, all those applications as well. Now, I do want to compare Jest and Chai, so you will hear the word Chai when it comes to testing. Now, Jest is an all-inclusive package, so it has the runners, the assertions, the mocking. All of those functionalities are built into the Jest framework, whereas the Chai itself is just a assertion library. So if you're going to be using Chai, then you need other components to be integrated as well. And that's the reason why I like Jest, because Jest is all inclusive. You simply npm install Jest, and you have everything that you need for your testing. And Jest, of course, minimal configuration because all of the defaults you can pretty much take. Whereas Chai, because this is an assertion library, you need a runner, of course, and you also need, if you're going to be mocking, then you need other libraries like sign on and so on. And Jest, I mentioned, it has built-in support for mocking and spying support. Chai, on the other hand, it requires external libraries. Now, Jest, since it was created by Facebook to test React projects, it is designed for JavaScript projects. Whereas if you are going to be using anything other than JavaScript, if you're going to be using outside of JavaScript, then you have to go to Chai and other libraries. Now, for the most part, with the SAP Cloud Application Programming Model, you're probably going to be using the Node.js flavor or the Type.js flavor, right? Very few people use Java, but so if you're going to be using the Java framework, then you will have to, you cannot use Jest. I also want to compare Jest with Mocha, so you will hear the word Mocha as well. Again, Mocha is a test runner, whereas Chai we saw was an assertion library. So if you're going to be using Mocha, then you have to integrate with Chai because you need some assertions. And again, if you're going to be mocking, then you need other external libraries like sign on and so on. So that's why I feel like it's an easy option to use Jest because it's all inclusive. You don't have to do much in the field of setting it up. Okay, so with that, let me show you how Jest works. So here I have a simple Node.js project, and in my package.json, all I had to do was install Jest. Okay, I installed it as a dependency, but typically what you would do is you would install it as a dev dependency. So you would simply say npm i -d and Jest. But I've already installed it, but definitely install it as a dev dependency and not as a dependency like what I have done here. I'll put a link to the GitHub in the description, so you should have access to this code. So I have a file called myfunctions.js, and inside of this myfunctions.js, I have 4 different methods: 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, the first 2 methods, they are not asynchronous, and the other 2, of course, they are asynchronous methods. Now, here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take an array of numbers, and I'm going to go ahead and square these numbers. So that's my function right here, right? And I have another function that takes the array of numbers, and then it goes and adds them here. And then I have a get method using Axios, and then the same get method, I just filter it based on user ID. Okay, so these are the 4 methods that I want to test. What I can do now that I've installed Jest, so that's the first step. You install Jest. Then you next create a file with the same name, myfunctions.test.js. So you create this file, and this is where all your test is going to be. And then in your package.json file, you would go ahead and create a script. And in this script, I call this test, and basically I'm just calling Jest. So that's all I need to do. Now let's assume that this file, this test file that you first created, is going to be empty, so it's completely empty. So now if I run npm run test, and this is going to kick off Jest, what it's going to say is it's going to say that there are no tests in this file. So it requires at least 1 test. So let's go ahead and, yeah, so you can see that your test suite must contain at least 1 test, and we don't have anything here. So I'm going to go put back everything here, and I will quickly go through how we have set it up. Now, you start with describe. I mean, this is optional, but what it allows you to do is it allows you to group tests together. So describe, and then you give a description for your group of tests. Sorry. So you give a description for your group of tests. I'm just calling it group 1. And then within this, the next one is a function. And here you have all your tests lined up one after the other. You can have another describe for another group of tests if you want. So I could have actually split it into 2 different tests, 2 different groups of tests, one for non-asynchronous and the other for synchronous if I wanted to. But in my case, I've put all of them in a single group. Okay, now that we have this describe, the next is the test itself. Now in this test, it starts with IT, but you can also use the word test if you want. So sometimes you may see the word test, sometimes you may see the word IT. They are both synonymous. And in IT, you first give a name, like a description of what you're going to be testing. So here we are testing the square of numbers in array. And then you have the function itself right here. And then what you have is I have like some numbers here in an array, and then I'm calling this method itself, square numbers with numbers, and then I say 2 equal 925, 625. So you can look into the Jest documentation for all of this, but what I'm interested is in showing you the syntax, and it's fairly straightforward. Of course, there are different assertions, so you can see 2b, of course, this is going to fail because this is an array, but 2 equal, you can say 925, 625. So this is my first test, and now I have another test like this, and in this test I'm squaring some numbers here as well, and you're expecting this sum of square numbers to be this much, and this is fairly straightforward. You can look into the Jest documentation. Now, when it comes to asynchronous, so Jest supports that out of the box as well. So you can simply use an async function here, and then you do pretty much the same thing. And then whatever you're getting back from this method, you can check whatever values you want. So nothing out of the ordinary. So if you can, yeah, you can simply look at the documentation and pretty much straightforward. You can set this up. Now that you run, so now that I have all the tests, what I can do is npm run test, and this is going to run the test for my Jest, all my tests. Now, the next thing I want to show is mocking, and this is the more popular. This is what you would really need to know. So I'm going to my second branch, git checkout to. Now, what I want to do, and you need to understand why we need mocking. So that is a very important concept in the world of testing. So I go back to my functions. So I've changed it a little bit here. So I added some computation goes here. So instead of just simply returning whatever I get from this axios.get, I make some changes and then I send the data back and then I return the data. Now, a lot of times you are not really interested in testing this. For example, let's say that this is axios.get. So this is, you know that Axios will work, or maybe this website is down, or maybe this is a very expensive operation. But a lot of times, maybe you don't really want to test this. You know 100% that this is going to work. What you really are interested is testing your logic right here. So in this case, because you don't want to like fail your test because of this or wait if it is going to take like 10 seconds to complete this, what you can do is you can mock this function alone. So by mocking this function, what you're going to do is you're going to provide like an implementation of this, or you can simply return a value for this as well. So either option is fine. And then you can use these tools, and then what you can do is then you can test this part of the code rather than this part of the code, which is not what you're interested in. Okay, so that is our goal, right? So in my test.js, I need to make the corresponding changes. So what I'm going to do is this Axios part of it, I want to go ahead and mock. So I didn't change any of these tests. But when it comes to the Axios test, what I have done is I have used this Axios and get. So this is my class and this is my method. So you can see I say axios.get. So I'm going to spy on that, which means it's going to have some metrics, how many times I have called and so on. So Jest is able to do all that. But in addition, I'm simply going to give a return value as well. So what Jest is going to do is when it sees axios.get, it's not going to actually run axios.get, but rather use this return value, this mock return value that I'm giving. Now you can also have a mock implementation of the function itself. So let's say you don't have the value, but you rather want to create like a function to return a value. That is also possible. You would just say mock implementation, but in this case, I'm simply going to return a value. So this is the value that I'm going to return right here. And here you can see my user ID is 1. So the body, so in my functions, I'm changing the body to say user ID and whatever the user ID is. So now when I run this, I should be able to mock this data. There's no this application is not going to be calling this URL, but rather using the mock data that I provided. So let me also go ahead put a breakpoint just to show you how things are working, right? So if I go ahead and put a breakpoint here. So this is my axios.get. This is my actual code, and I'm putting a breakpoint here, and I'm saying npm run test. So when I run this npm test, it's going to go and say get post using Axios, and when it hits that line, what I'm going to do is I'm going to check for the data itself. And the data should now say, okay, so it has hit the data, and you can see the data, there's only 2 rows. And these 2 rows are coming from our mock value right here. Even though if I go to this website right here, this has like this whole bunch of data right here. But this is the actual get message, but Jest was able to mock it and return just the rows that we gave in our test.js, because this is the return value that we gave. Okay, so now our test will run just like what we have in our settings. And it's simply going to call all these because I have multiple get requests here. So it was all calling all of that, but it was all mocking this stuff, right? Yeah, so that's how you can run. Now, I mentioned that Jest also provides code coverage as well. So what you can do is you can say dash dash coverage in addition to just having Jest. So in this case, what it will do is it will do some coverage of how many test cases you have as well. So let me go into my myfunctions.js file, and let me go ahead and add another method here as well. Const sum of numbers equals, it can take a comma b, and then it can return a plus b. So very simple code right here, and I will go ahead and expose this as well, sum of numbers. So now I have the coverage. So in my thing, I said dash dash coverage right here. So if I run my test now, what it's going to do is it's going to give you a little bit more metrics on the code coverage that you have. So in addition to running the test itself, it's going to go ahead and look at your source code, find out all the number of methods that you have and how many that you're actually testing. So really good tool to go ahead and do some testing, and it's fairly easy to set up. So our next goal, what I want to do is I want to take whatever we have learned, and I want to go ahead and apply that to SAP CAP Framework. Okay, so you can see here, it's giving me a code coverage saying that, hey, you are testing, so like you have so many tests, it's passed everything, but it also says that, hey, you're only testing like 88% or 94%. Okay, so it gives you that coverage as well because we are not testing that sum, that new method that we added. That's not something that we are testing. So this gives you the code coverage based on that. Okay, so now let's take whatever we have learned on Jest and apply that to the SAP Cloud Framework. So here I have a very simple SAP CAP application. So if I look at my schema.cds file, so in my schema.cds file, I have just two entities, the products and the Northwind customers. Now, products is a local entity, as you can see right here, and Northwind customers, this is a remote entity coming from the publicly available Northwind OData service. Now, I want to test this thing right here, and I have a custom handler for the Northwind customers. So here, if you look in my custom handler, this is what is getting called in order for me to get the Northwind customers. Now, first things first, I need to go ahead and install Jest as a dev dependency. So in this case, I've actually installed it correctly as a dev dependency, which is good. Then the next thing is in my test, I have Jest, and I also have force exit so that it will exit after the test is complete. Now, what I have done here, and again, like I mentioned, Jest has a lot of defaults. Instead of putting the file as service.test.js, so remember in the last application, we created a file with the same name, right? So with the same name with test.js, and it was able to pick it up. And so instead of cluttering up my source code like that, what you can do is you can create a folder called __ test, and then __. So if you create a folder like this and you put your files in here, Jest will automatically pick it up because you can see here I'm not telling Jest where my test files are, but I just created a file like this, a folder like this, and I put all my tests like this. But if you want to specify the name, that's fine too. If you want to give it a different name, yeah, feel free to do that, but make sure you provide the config values for where the test is. Okay, so here what I have done is I have a service.test.js file, so you can have any test.js file here. So in this case, we already know describe is what groups the tests together, but I only have one test, but it's inside this describe. And here you have to figure out how to do the test. In my previous example, it was fairly easy, but here you have to figure out how am I going to call my get request and so on. So the SAP CAP framework provides you with a CDS test function. So by doing this CDS.test, what it allows you to do is it allows you to get like a get implementation of your endpoints. So now I have, by writing this line of code right here, I'm able to do a get on any of the endpoints that I have in my CAP framework. So here, that's exactly what I'm doing right here. I'm doing an await, and because I have access to this get, I'm able to do and like I can provide this endpoint and I can do an await get like this. And this is of course going to call the on handler, right? So it's going to call this method that gets the customers, which is part of this on handler, on read handler. Okay, so now that you have access to how you can test it, so this is going to call my get customers method, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to expect like, hey, I want to expect the status to be 200, and then the first value of this customer ID to be this ALFKI. So this is fairly straightforward. You can also retrieve, post, put, stuff like that. So you can get a lot of stuff from this CDS test, but in our test, we are only doing a get. So we can simply just destructure and get the get method. Okay, so this is straightforward. Now this is simply going to do a get, and it will do whatever we have in our get method right here, and it's going to return the value and it will test it. Okay, but now what I want to do is I don't want to use my get method right here. Want to mock this. So I don't want to, I just want to mock this get customers. So how do we do this, right? So I go to my mock service.test.js file. So here, a little different. So you have to kind of pay attention how we are going to do this. Last time we did axios.get, so we were simply able to pass in the spy on with the axios as the class, get as the method. But here, this is our own class. We have access to the code. So we are going to require this Northwind utils. So this Northwind utils is where my get customers method is. So I got my Northwind utils. I also have a file called customers.json file. So if I look at my customers.json file, I have this mock data. So this is the mock data that I want to return. I don't want to use the actual get customers at all. So here I've gotten this mock data customers right here. So now here I have this line here that just says Northwind just.spy on, and instead of Axios, I'm putting the module name Northwind utils. In the previous example, we saw Axios and then get, but here I put Northwind utils and I say get customers. And instead of returning a value, I'm actually returning a method which is going to go read this customers and get the data. But pretty much the same thing, except this return value, instead of mock return value, I'm having a function that returns the value. And this is our own class and method, right? Okay, so now that we have this, this is what is going to get called when get customers is called. So then we again get access to this get method right here. Then we do the same thing again, and this, if I run npm run start or run test, then I should get code coverage for both these tests. One is for without mocking, and one is with mocking as well. So both of them should complete, and they should complete successfully. So I will have the code, the GitHub code in GitHub. It should be there in the description. So you can see that both of them passed in my package.json. You can add other flags as well, dash coverage and so on, but I haven't added them all. You can look into the documentation for doing that. Okay, so I want to go to the next branch, which has some after handler. So in this case, I don't have any after handler in the first branch. In the second branch, in addition to reading the Northwind data, I also have a after handler as well. So if you look in my service.js file, I read and then after handler, I modify the customers, and in my modify customers, I simply change everyone's city to Atlanta. Okay, so how is my test going to change? So if I go to my service.test.js, I simply added another line just to make sure that my city is going to be Atlanta. Okay, so this is the only thing that I changed in my actual thing. Now, if I go to my mock service.js file, here what I have done is I have because the data is going to be my own data, and in my own data, you can see here that I also changed the customer ID, right? In this mock data, the data that I'm returning, the ID is different. So here again, so I had, yeah, so this was the same in branch one also, so nothing changed here. But what I have is I've said that I've added this additional line saying that the city needs to be Atlanta. So we are doing the read. Then we are also going to check the logic for the after handler as well. But basically, this is all the line that we've added because I'm setting everybody's city to Atlanta. But based on your use case, you can do assertions based on your use case. But otherwise, this looks pretty much the same as the previous one. So if I run npm run test, I should pretty much get the same results. Everything should pass because the after handler is going to make sure that everybody's city is Atlanta. Okay, so now that we have a good understanding of Jest and how easy it is to set up, it's very easy to set up because yeah, you can simply npm run install Jest as a dev dependency, and you can create this folder and you can start writing tests. So fairly straightforward. I hope you use it. But now I do want to show other tools that you can use to do some testing as well. So let's say I have this application in my up and running, and let's say I have this requirement where I want to test like 5 inserts, like a couple of deletes and so on. So how can I do this, right? I mean, Jest is only meant for unit testing. So for this, you can use the Postman tool. And I'm pretty sure everyone has used Postman one time or the other. What you can do is I have my product. So what I'm going to do, first of all, create an environment variables, right? So I have my local host 4004. This is my path, and then you set this all up. And then here I've added 5 post requests, one after the other. And the cool thing with Postman is it allows you to have some request scripts and also some post response as well. So you can modify the request with some variables and so on. So here what I'm doing, as you can see in the body, is I'm giving some values here, counter for the description, the cost, and that's my schema.cds, right? So for this guy right here. So I have 5 entries right here. They're all getting some values. These values keep getting incremented, so on. So I can go ahead and run all these stuff one after the other. Oops, I have to run the npm run test. Make sure that your app is running so that you can yeah, so once you have your app running, what you can do, yeah, you can keep running this one after the other. Now, Postman also allows you to run as a collection. So if you want to run this without manual intervention, right? So you can simply say run collection, and then you can even provide a file, like a counter file or something, and you can run like 5, 10 iterations, however much you want. So you can provide this file, and based on the file, it will tell like, okay, I'll run 5 iterations. So it will run all of this 5 times. Or you can remove some of these if you don't want to run them. So Postman is a really good tool if you want to like work work on the APIs that you created with the SAP CAP framework. But it's not just isolated to the SAP CAP framework. You can also use Postman for wrap frame, like other OData services as well. Okay, so that is about Postman. Now, there's also one other tool that I do want to talk about. So with Postman, you're limited to one request at a time. But let's say I have a requirement where I want like 100 users hitting my OData service at the same time. So for this, you can use this tool called Apache JMeter. So that's what I have, the Apache JMeter right here. So you can simply run JMeter. You can download and install JMeter, Apache JMeter. And when you open it for the first time, you won't see this, of course. You will see just a test plan right here on the top. What you can do is you can go ahead and rename it. I renamed it as the Northwind OData Service. And the next thing in your test plan, what you want to do is you want to add users, how many users are going to create. So for this, you simply go add thread users. Thread group is what you want to do. And here you have the thread group. And of course, you can rename it. So I have renamed it right here. And you can tell how many users you want. So I want 10 users. And in 1 second, I want it to be ramped up to 10 users. And then once they're here, once 10 users are hitting the system, I want you to loop 20 times. I want you to run this the HTTP request 20 times with a constant load of 10 users. So that's how you specify how many users you want. And then you can also have actions if an error occurs. So in my case, I don't care, just continue even if an error occurs. Then once you have the number of users, then what you can do is you can go ahead and specify your HTTP request itself. So add a sampler HTTP request. So in my HTTP request, what I have done is I have specified localhost. I've set 4004. This is my path. So I've set all these values up here, and this is of course a get method. So it's going to make calls to this endpoint, and you can add any number of HTTP requests here that you want. But here I've only added one HTTP request, and I also want to see the results. So you can simply go here, and you can also add like a post, like you can add a to see the data as well. So where's my listener? Okay, so you can add a listener here, and then you have multiple options as to how you can see the data. So I've added it as a view results tree. And now that you have all this, what you can do is you can actually test your code itself by clicking this green button. And what it's going to do is it's going to go ahead and call this method multiple times. So here, if I go all the way down, why is it failing? Oh, I stopped it. Okay, so I do need to keep running it. So that explains it. Okay, I think what I did was I started the test instead of doing the start. Okay, so now we know that this thing is running. So what I can do is I can go back to my Apache JMeter. I can run it one more time, and because we had this as continue, it just continued, but now you should see green. Yeah, so you can see that it's all green because it's working fine. Okay, so those are some of the tools and unit testing framework that you can use with your SAP Cloud Application Programming Model. Definitely take advantage of Jest. It is fairly easy to integrate with your application, and with very minimal effort, you get a lot of gain. Okay, thanks everyone.